Okay. When Hugh the Undecided was Prince of Caid, he felt that having a war with the West would be a good thing, and Paul of Bellatrix was king of the West, and he thought that a war would be good too, because it would give both groups a reason to fight together as teams and to fight each other. And Hugh wasn't able to make it to the event where the challenge was put to them, but he asked Morven of Carrick to convey his challenge to Paul. So at the closing court of March Crown Tourney, Morven came up and Bevan came with him, and she read the challenge to them, and Morven threw down one of Hugh's gauntlets, and it was a very heavy cast bronze gauntlet. And Paul picked it up and tapped it in his hands and smiled and says, "Now, traditionally I'm supposed to slap you in the face with this, aren't I?" And Morven looked a little uncomfortable and said, "Yes." And Paul then smiled again and said, "Well, perhaps I will just hand it to you and ask you to slap Hugh in the face for me." So he handed him the gauntlet, and Morven said, "Just how hard should I slap him, Your Majesty?" And Paul smiled again and said, "As hard as you dare." Knowing that Morven was part of the Brotherhood of the Blade, that we all followed Hugh into court and into combat. The event was actually held in Bakersfield on a junior college athletic field, and we found that while we were only getting 2 fighters from Isles, and we were only getting 1 or 2 from Calafia, and we weren't getting any fighters from Dryburgh for the event. So it was mostly fighters from Angels. And we were afraid we were going to be badly outnumbered. So I passed the rumor around that everyone should bring extra beer and liquor, and we would see if we could bribe the Rieslingshires to change side, because they had a reputation for liking to drink. And so we did. Before the fighting started, we offered the Rieslingers as much as they could drink of our liquor if they would change sides and fight with us. And Douglas Longshanks, who led the Rieslingshire contingent, said, "We'd love to drink your liquor, but if we left Paul, he would only have 5 men fighting with him." So they knew they couldn't do that. There were 12 people from Rieslingshire, and Paul and 5 others from the Kingdom of the West. And we started off the first battle, I think it was 19 versus 19. No, we had 21, they had 19. And the second battle, 2 more Caidans had arrived, so we were up to 23. And for the third battle, the castle battle, there were 25 Caidans and still 19 Westerners. Probably the most telling thing on the first battle, which was a bridge battle, was we had 6 pole arms and they had 1 pole arm. And that got broken partway through the fight. So they learned a lot about pole arms, and I killed King Paul with my pole arm partway through that fight. That was really nice. And in the field battle, we expected to lose the field battle, but we stayed a cohesive unit for a lot longer than anyone expected. And we gave them a good run for their money. And the third battle, the castle battle, we decisively won the castle battle. After the castle battle, they said, "We should try this castle battle again, but we want to hold the castle." And Paul put his foot on the pole arms and said, "And we'll take these too."
So who won that or did they get to redo the battle, or?
Oh yeah, we redid it, and with them defending the castle, they successfully defended the castle. And we let them have some of the pole arms. We didn't let them have all the pole arms. The first Caid Rebellion we talked about. the second Caid Rebellion, because we had scared the Westerners with the first one, we got a lot more response from the West, and we were gearing up our army at the time. Shortly after I joined the SCA, one night Charles in Dublin and I sat down and we listed all the fighters that we knew in Caid, and we came up with a list of 37 fighters. So it was a very small group. By the time of the second Caid Rebellion, we had grown some, and I think it might have been possible to field an army of over 40, maybe possibly even 50 if we'd gotten everyone in Caid who was a fighter to come to an event. As it was at the second Caid Rebellion, we had 37 men in our army, which was really a big increase from the previous year when we topped out at 25. Well, we had also inspired the West, and the West was there with 51 fighters, and they had built the first shield wall that we had ever seen. They had not one polearm, they had at least a dozen polearms. They were prepared to wipe us out. And when we came to the field battle, we started off with the field battle. I was assigned the left flank unit, and I had 5 other very good unbelted fighters, several of whom eventually became knights. And on the opposite side of the field, we could see a group of about 10 belted fighters opposite us. And that looked pretty impressive, so we stationed ourselves well out on the left flank so that we'd have a little room to maneuver. And after the battle, Paul said, "You know, it was because you were stationed so far out on the flank that I took the reserve and added it to William of Houghton's flank attack, because he didn't think that William had enough men to encompass us and roll up the flank of the main Caid line. And so he took the reserve, which was about another 8 West Kingdom knights, and added it to William's attack. And when they started that battle, we fell back slowly in front of all of these belted fighters. And when we got to the point where we were even with the end of our line, we knew we couldn't fall back any further. So we stood, and they attacked us. And I think I got 2 blows toward Paul that he blocked when William the Lucky ran into me and knocked me down. And I found myself crawling through the battle because I knew if I stood up I'd be killed immediately. And I crawled as fast as I could to the rear, dragging my polearm, and then I stood up, and one of my 5 team members was still alive, and he was about to be killed. Unfortunately, they called hold at that point, and looking around, we could see that about half of the Caid line had vaporized. And we were now almost the opposite flank. And when they said lay on, there didn't seem to be anything to do but to try to charge through the main western line, which several of us did break through, and were then hunted down mercilessly. But it was interesting, and we found that the Westerners were certainly taking us seriously.
Third rebellion that had to be called the Brotherhood Invasion of Riesling because the North decided they didn't like wars. I still call it the Third Rebellion. The People's Liberation Front of Caid came up and invaded Riesling. And in the Third Rebellion after the war fighting, there was archery. You know, they put in archery. They've been experimenting with it. And it was still developing. We had one battle there where armor counted. But that was kind of confusing because the archers would go and shoot you, and plate counted. Plate was proved against arrows, and so they'd shoot me. I had my surcoat with my arms on it. I had plate by then, but not the plate I have now. And so I had a surcoat with my arms on it, and they'd be busy going in and angling for a shot. They'd wait for my shield to be a little bit out of the way, and they'd shoot, and they wouldn't take it. And so it was confusing because then I'd have to go and tap my chest so that they knew that I had armor on. But we were still experimenting.